Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm AndyRC and today I'm going to be checking out a bunch of products from iFlight in preparation for the digital DJI FPV system. Now, whether you are on board with DJI coming into our sector of the hobby or you absolutely hate it, one thing that you can't deny is that there are a bunch of companies who are accommodating this system. So this is the new iFlight DC5 freestyle frame, and I think this is where the DJI system sits, because I think there are some barriers when it comes to racing. For example, I know a lot of races use the analog VTX signal in order to do the timing system, so they'd have to use a different system if they wanted to do racing. Also, the DJI system records HD footage really well, and you really don't want to have the props in shot to do that. So with this frame, it is actually a dead cat configuration, which you don't see much anymore, but that completely gets the props out of shot. And the idea is that this is going to be a freestyle camera copter. So it looks fairly simple, and that is something that is great about the DJI Air unit. So I fitted it to a 3-inch model first of all, but it is just plug and play, and it's actually not as large as you think it is. I mean, you know, it can fit into a 3-inch model quite nicely. And yesterday on my Patreon, I maidened this guy, and I had a GoPro Hero 4 Black on my head, and I switched between that and the recorded footage from this, and it was polarizing how much better the recording was from this camera than the camera that was on my head. But anyways, I'm not going to talk much about the digital DJI FPV system. Let's take a look at what you get. So we have got a top and bottom plate and a sandwich plate. We've got these TPU parts here, and this is where I think people initially weren't sure about this unit, is that it is fairly wide. So they have come up with this system to hold it in place, but for me with this one it was just a little bit of foam and some sticky back tape, and it sits in there nicely, and the props miss without any issues. So we've got two iFlight straps, we've got some landing feet which I don't tend to use, and what we've got here are, we've got some really sticky silicone mats for the top. That's cool. We've got a bunch of standoffs. So these are the aluminium standoffs, but also standoffs for a flight controller or stack. Then we have got some soft mounts as well, which is cool. And lastly, we have got this TPU part here for the two antennas, which I'm not sure about, you know, because from the testing that I've done so far, I really like the idea of getting the antennas up really high. You see, when you have a top-mounted battery on a freestyle frame, these are just going to poke out of the back like that. And I'm also not sure if they are going to cover the active element as well. Painless 360 and Menace did a video series, and they discovered that TPU can actually detune the antennas if they are covered in TPU. So I'll have to see what that's like once it's all built up. So that is the frame. Next, we've got the flight controller and ESCs. This is the Success F7 Twin G, and I'm a little bit peeved because I think just a couple of days ago they announced a flight controller which is the same as this one, except that it's got the connector for the air unit, so it plugs directly in, and it's also got a 9-volt regulator, which this one hasn't. I think it's only got 5 volt, and this is something that I think is important with this new digital DJI system. One thing that you can say about analog is if you are having noise issues, it usually shows through your video, and with the digital system I don't think you're going to see noise, but Is it going to reduce perhaps your range or something like that? You can actually use the noise in analog video to combat problems that you're getting through your ESC system. So speaking of the ESCs, they are here, and I think they are BL Heli 32 4-in-1, and they say that you only need to use an external capacitor when going to 5S. So it comes with this capacitor here. It's a Rubicon capacitor, which is always good to see. Only 220 microfarad, so 35 volt as well. We've got this really thick XT60 connector. What is that? I think it's 12, but not really needed. I think 14 is all you need. And then we've got the various connectors. So there's a look at the ESC board, and we've got a current meter built into it, and this connector will just go directly to the flight controller. Interestingly, the screws for the entire stack have come in the ESC box, and we've got these soft mounts here as well as the screws for the top. You can buy these things separately, so I'm not quite sure what the deal would be, whether you get the screws if you just bought the flight controller. There is one more thing I want to mention about the flight controller. This is the Bluetooth edition, so you can get the SpeedyBee app and it will work with Bluetooth, but yeah, shame it doesn't have a 9-volt regulator or a 8-volt regulator for your VTX. It's just going to go off VBAT. But if they are saying you don't need an external capacitor up to 5S, then maybe it's going to be a clean picture anyways. Next we have the motors. So I think these are the Sing, is that how you say it? Oh, it's the pink version, and they are a 2208. I don't think I've actually tried the new 2208 motors, and they are a 2450 kV, so this is going to be 4S. Yeah, so their new flight controller with the 9-volt out for the air unit could go up to 6S, but as this flight controller is going to be using VBAT, then I can only go up to 4S unless I put my own regulator in there, because the air unit can't take a 6S voltage. Lastly, they have sent me some more of the Nazgul 5140 props. They are absolutely fantastic on the Nazgul 5 bind and fly, which is one of my current favorite bind and fly models. So I'm gonna build all of this stuff up. I'm not going to be putting the air unit in today. This is something that's great about the air unit, is that you can actually buy the connectors as a spare part. So if you wanted to, you could switch out the air unit into a different model. But the air unit actually isn't that expensive when you think about what it's doing. I mean, it's a HD recorder, it's a VTX, it's digital, and it's also going to have control, I guess you would say eventually. You don't need the controller, and that's the other thing that I think has been missed quite a lot. You know, 80% of the people who've bought into this DJI system have not bought the controller, because you can use S-Bus or you can use Crossfire, and I've used the R9 system here. So it actually doesn't work out as expensive if you don't go down the controller route. So this is the first part of building the frame, and so far it's very easy because it's the same setup as the bind and fly Nazgul 5. We just have the dead cat configuration. So there is a top sandwich plate, and it has got recessed nuts on the 30 by 30 mounting holes, and I've used the brass screws that come with the ESCs. The frame actually does come with screws for a stack, but they are a little bit longer, I guess, to accommodate a VTX. So I'm hoping that once I've got the ESC board on there along with the gummies and the soft mounting, and then the flight controller, that I'm not going to have some of the screw protruding up, because I don't need a VTX with this guy, with the DJI digital system sitting at the back. And then lastly, the bottom plate has got these nuts also recessed into the frame, but they're not fully recessed, so if you wanted to do some skidding along the ground, then those could get damaged. Let me just check actually though. Yeah, that's not really happened with the Nazgul 5, but I do have these bits of TPU on this one, whereas this frame doesn't come with that. But I'm not going to take the building of the frame any further, because from this point on I can add all of the components and not have the standoffs getting in the way. I can also use the way they have mounted the flight controller and ESC from the Nazgul 5 and copy it, because this flies superb in this configuration. Okay, so I've got all of the electronics wired up as much as I can have without having the air unit in there. There are going to be a couple of things that I'm going to have to decide once the air unit is switched into this frame, and as I say, that's going to be down the line somewhere, but I'll show you what I have done so far. So the first thing that I did was solder the 12 gauge wire to the 4-in-1 ESC board, and I also soldered the low ESR capacitor underneath, which I'm thinking might be a mistake. I thought I could get away with it not interfering with the air unit, but it gets very close, so I'll have to see about that. I might have to take that off. I mean, they say you don't need to run it on a 4S, but I like to run one anyways. And then I installed the motors, which is pretty standard. I used some magic tape just to sort of line everything up. I then used the 2 O-rings that you get in the box for the 4-in-1 ESC board and put them down the screws, and then placed the ESC board over the top. And I then cut the motor wires to length. These are nice silicone wires. I tinned them up, as well as tinning up the 4-in-1 ESC board, and then I soldered those into place. Then I tinned up all of the different solder pads that I want to use on the flight controller, and it's pretty hard to see, but I'm hopefully going to be running Crossfire on this guy. So we've got a 5-volt there, which is the red wire, and then we've got a ground underneath that, so that's going to power the receiver. And then here we've got the RX and the TX, and again that's going to be for Crossfire. And I've just left that open-ended because I'm not sure how I'm going to mount the Crossfire antenna and where the receiver's going to go, etc. once the air unit is in there. And then this is the cable that you can order separate from DJI, and I've actually removed one of the wires, so it's the yellow wire, which is the DJI protocol for control. I don't need that because for this model I'm going to be using Crossfire, like I say, so you just get a pin under one of those tabs and lift it up. But the grey wire is soldered to the UART RX3, and the white wire is the TX, and again for UART3, and then this brown wire here is the ground for the signal, but I'm not using DJI's protocol, but I've got a ground pad there anyway, so I thought I'd solder that up. And then the red and the black, those are directly soldered to the battery terminals, because as I said earlier, there is no regulator on here. I think you have to have 7 volts, and I think it goes up to 17 volts for the air unit. So that is everything that I have got connected, and I've also put the TPU on here, so I'm gonna put all of the standoffs in place just so that we can see what it'll look like when it's finished. So here is the model completed, minus the air unit, of course. So my plan is to review the DJI Digital FPV system and hopefully find some things that nobody else has found yet, but there are so many videos out there. To be honest, I'm doing it just for myself, really, because I'm really interested in this technology. I've been saying for a while, this hobby kind of needs a boost, and I've always said that it was HD FPV that would be the next step up. Now, don't think that this is me giving up on analog, because that is not the case. I totally understand if you have got, you know, $600 worth of analog goggles, then you're going to be pretty mad about this system and having to buy new goggles, and will probably want to wait for those systems that are probably going to be coming out towards the end of the year, maybe next year, that will be compatible with your HDO goggles. But as for a frame, I do really like it. I think if I was to build a freestyle frame in general, it would be like this, because I like to get the props out of shot. So even if you are looking at it as just a freestyle frame and not a DJI Digital FPV system frame, you could stick a GoPro on the top of there and not get the props in shot. There are a couple of things that I would change. For example, all of the iFlight stacks have the battery connector coming out of the back, and on this frame I put a little hole here just so that it can loop around. I mean, it's not going to get anywhere near the props if I just sort of tie it to the side, but that's really my only complaint. The frames are very cheap and I really like them. So I will put a link in the description to everything mentioned in this video, and until the next time, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.